I'm a quiet librarian with simple clothes, and everyone thinks I have no taste. My future daughter-in-law decided to publicly mock it, but she had no idea that I am a secret critic in a world ruled by millions, and my verdict could destroy her life. You won't believe what happened when she found out who I really am. My name is Charlotte, and at 63 years old, my life has found a comfortable rhythm. I've always been a woman who finds joy in the quiet details. The way the morning light hits the dust motes in my living room, the crisp scent of a new book, the perfect balance of a vintage teacup in my hand. I'm a retired librarian, but my real passion, a secret joy that has sustained me for years, is my freelance work as a secret shopper. Not for department stores or restaurants, but for one of the most prestigious fashion magazines in the world, Vogue. It started as a lark, a way to use my keen eye for detail and my love of aesthetics, but it quickly became an essential part of who I am. I travel under the radar, a ghost in plain sight, evaluating everything from boutique window displays to the texture of a handbag. It's an art form, a dance between being completely unnoticeable and absorbing every single detail. I live in a modest two-story house in a quiet neighborhood, and my car, a sensible 2010 Honda Civic, is a testament to my understated lifestyle. My clothes, while well-made, are always a little bit behind the trends, which is exactly the point. I am a canvas for observation, not a subject. This quiet, careful life was about to be upended by a single, casual insult at my son's engagement party. The party was a lavish affair, held in the rooftop ballroom of a new high-rise in downtown Chicago. My son, Daniel, was getting married to a woman named Serena, and I had been nothing but supportive. I had been quietly contributing to their savings, offering advice, and trying to be the kind of mother-in-law I would have wanted. I've always believed that family is about support, not judgment. Serena, however, seemed to operate on a different philosophy. She was a whirlwind of energy, a socialite with a penchant for designer labels, and a cutting remark. She was beautiful, of course, with perfect hair and a dress that must have cost more than my car, but there was a sharpness to her that made me uncomfortable. She was charming on the surface, but underneath, I sensed a deep, almost desperate need to prove her superiority. I wanted to believe it was just nerves, that she was just trying to impress her new family, but my instincts, honed by years of quietly observing the world, told me otherwise. I had arrived at the party in my favorite dress, a simple charcoal gray silk sheath that I had purchased years ago. It was comfortable and elegant in its own way, but it was nothing compared to the glittering gowns and sharp suits of the other guests. I wasn't trying to make a statement. I was simply trying to be myself. But Serena saw it as a statement, and not a good one. She spotted me by the hors d'oeuvre table, a small smile playing on her lips. She sauntered over, her laugh a little too loud. "Oh, Charlotte, you made it! I wasn't sure you would. That little Honda of yours must have taken forever to get here." It was a jab, of course, a thinly veiled insult wrapped in a pretty bow. I just smiled, a little too calmly. "It got me here just fine, Serena. The traffic was a bit of a mess, but a good book on audio made the time fly." She just waved her hand dismissively, as if my hobbies were beneath her. "Right, a book." And then her eyes drifted down to my dress. She gave a theatrical sigh. "I'm glad you made the effort, though. It's a very practical choice." She looked me up and down, a look of pity and condescension in her eyes. "You know, for the next event, maybe we can go shopping together. I can show you some places that might, well, let's just say, help you catch up with the times. You need a little bit of flair, something that says you're here to celebrate, not just to observe." It was a public humiliation, a quiet little knife twisted in my back. She was not only insulting my dress, but my very being. She was saying that I, a woman who had lived a full and rich life, had no taste. And she was saying it in front of a room full of strangers, people who would now see me as the dowdy, unstylish mother of the groom. I felt a flash of something I hadn't felt in a long time. Pure, unadulterated fury. My job as a secret shopper for Vogue wasn't about wearing the latest trends. It was about understanding them, dissecting them, and writing about them with a clarity and insight that few others possessed. My taste wasn't just good, it was legendary within a very small, very exclusive circle. My articles, published under a pseudonym, had shaped careers and determined trends. The irony was so thick I could choke on it. The woman who was currently lecturing me on flair had no idea that I had a hand in picking out the very dress she was wearing. I felt a cold calm settle over me. I wasn't going to snap back. I wasn't going to defend myself. I was going to observe. I was going to watch her, and I was going to use everything I had learned in my quiet, secret life to dismantle her. But not yet. Not here. I just gave her a small, tight smile. "That's very thoughtful of you, Serena. I'll keep that in mind." My voice was low and calm, almost a purr. She seemed satisfied, mistaking my quietness for defeat. She laughed again, a little too loud, and then floated off to another group of people, undoubtedly to spread her witty little observations about me. I looked at my son, Daniel, who was talking to his friends, completely oblivious to the exchange. I felt a pang of disappointment. Had he not noticed, or had he just chosen to ignore it? It was a question that would haunt me for the rest of the night. I walked over to a quiet corner, away from the glittering, cruel crowd, and took a deep breath. My heart was pounding, but it wasn't with fear. It was with a new, quiet determination. My job wasn't just about fashion. It was about seeing the truth, about exposing the fakes, about finding the real stories underneath the shiny exteriors. And I had a feeling that Serena, with her perfectly styled hair and her dismissive laugh, was a very big fake indeed. This was no longer just an engagement party. It was an assignment. I was going to observe, I was going to analyze, and I was going to find out what was really going on here. I was a secret shopper for Vogue, and my daughter-in-law had just made the biggest mistake of her life. She had underestimated the old lady in this simple gray dress, and she was about to find out just how expensive that mistake was going to be. My mission was simple: gather all the information and find a way to make her pay for her words. I was not just a retired librarian. I was a professional observer, and the game was on. Before I continue, I would like to ask you for a little favor. If my story resonates with you and you find yourself intrigued, consider subscribing to my channel. It's a brand new adventure for me, and I have a feeling there will be more stories to share. Serena's taunt had not only bruised my ego, but had also shifted the entire dynamic of the evening. I was no longer an honored guest. I was a curiosity, a living punchline. I saw guests glancing at me, then at Serena, a smirk on their faces. I could feel the invisible judgment hanging in the air like a thick fog. But my anger was a slow burn, not a frantic flame. My training for Vogue had taught me to control my emotions, to observe without reaction, to turn every slight into a piece of data. My mind, usually a quiet library of facts and figures, was now a bustling newsroom. I was compiling a mental file on Serena, her need for public validation, her casual cruelty, her obsession with appearances. She was not just a social climber, she was a predator, and I was her first target in her new family. The more I observed her, the more I saw the cracks in her perfect facade. She was constantly checking her phone, a look of anxiety in her eyes. Her smile, so radiant a moment ago, would disappear as soon as she turned away from a conversation. She was a performance artist, and I was her most critical audience. My son, Daniel, finally made his way over to me, a slightly embarrassed look on his face. He kissed me on the cheek. "Mom, are you okay?" Serena said. Well, she was just joking. His words were a weak attempt at a defense, and they stung more than Serena's insult. He hadn't stood up for me. He had just offered a flimsy excuse for his fiancée's behavior. I looked at him, my heart aching. He had always been such a kind boy, but now he seemed a little lost, a little complicit in this new world of superficiality. "I'm fine, Daniel," I said, my voice as calm as a placid lake. It was a very modern joke. He seemed relieved, not understanding the sarcasm dripping from every word. He just nodded and went back to his friends. It was in that moment that I realized the depth of the problem. Serena hadn't just insulted me, she had isolated me from my own son. She had managed to create a wedge between us, and Daniel was either too blind or too weak to see it. It was a calculated move, and it was working. My attention was drawn to a large man in a perfectly tailored tuxedo. He was standing with the owner of the company, a man named Marcus. They were deep in conversation, and I noticed Marcus was hanging on his every word. My instincts kicked in. I discreetly pulled out my phone, a simple, unassuming flip phone, and sent a quick text to my editor at Vogue. The text was simple. "Who is the well-dressed gentleman with Marcus from Whitlock and Associates?" A few minutes later, I received a text back. The man's name was David Sterling. He was not just a guest, he was one of the most powerful men in fashion, a silent partner in several major luxury brands. He was also a consultant for Vogue, and his opinion was the one that truly mattered. I smiled to myself, a small, secret smile. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to fall into place. The Whitlocks, in all their self-importance, had no idea who was standing in their midst. They were so focused on their own social climbing that they had no idea they were in the presence of someone who could make or break them. I was no longer a victim. I was a player in a much bigger game. I was a part of a world they desperately wanted to be in, and they didn't even know it. The irony was delicious. I decided to make my move. I casually walked over to the bar, positioning myself just close enough to the two men to hear their conversation, but not so close as to seem intrusive. I ordered a sparkling water, my eyes darting between the two men. David Sterling was speaking about a new line of menswear, a collection he was considering investing in. He seemed to be having trouble making a decision. "It's all style, no substance," he said, shaking his head. "They've got the look, but the quality of the fabric, it's just not there. It's an illusion." I felt a sudden jolt. His words were a mirror of my own thoughts about Serena. The whole night she had been an illusion, a beautiful but hollow shell. This was the opening I had been waiting for. I took a deep breath and spoke, my voice a quiet contrast to the noisy ballroom. "Sometimes the illusion is all that matters." Both men turned to look at me, surprised. I continued, "Most people don't look past the surface. They see the sparkle and the sheen, and they don't even think to question what's underneath. But the people who know the difference, they're the ones who truly matter." David Sterling's eyes lit up. He looked at me, a flicker of surprise and respect in his gaze. "You're absolutely right," he said. "It's a rare person who can see the difference." He looked at me again, really looked at me. I had his attention. I had used the language of fashion, the secret language of my other life, to get him to see me as an equal. The conversation flowed easily after that. We talked about fabrics, about the changing landscape of fashion, about the difference between trend and timeless style. I wasn't just talking to him. I was connecting with him on a level that Serena and her kind could never understand. I saw Serena's eyes on me from across the room. She was looking at me, then at David, her face a mask of confusion. Who was this dowdy old woman? Why was she talking to him? She was completely out of her element, completely at a loss. It was beautiful. The night was no longer a source of pain, but of power. I was not just Charlotte, the retired librarian. I was a woman of substance, a woman with a secret life and a network of powerful people who saw my true value. And Serena, in her desperation to prove herself, had just opened a door for me that she couldn't close. I was no longer a victim. I was a quiet force to be reckoned with. The climax of this story was just beginning.
Richard's toast was a bombshell, a polite but devastating takedown of the Whitlocks' entire worldview. After he finished, he simply handed the microphone back to a shell-shocked Mr. Whitlock, gave a polite nod to the crowd, and walked over to me. He held out his hand, a warm smile on his face. "Eleanor, I hope you'll accept my thanks in person. It was an honor to meet you." I took his hand, my own trembling slightly. "Thank you, Richard. That was an incredible thing to do." He just squeezed my hand gently. "You deserve it. Now, how about we get a drink and talk? I'd love to hear more about your work as a history teacher." The offer was more than just a gesture. It was a lifeline. He was treating me like a person, like an equal, not like an embarrassing old woman who needed to be tolerated. The Whitlocks, meanwhile, were in a state of chaos. Mr. Whitlock was sputtering into the microphone, trying to salvage his pride, but no one was listening. Meredith Whitlock's face was a mask of fury, her eyes fixed on me with a venomous glare. Amelia looked utterly mortified, her earlier smugness completely gone. She was staring at me, at Richard, at the floor, anywhere but at me. It was a beautiful sight to behold, a masterpiece of a comeuppance. As Richard and I walked to the bar, I felt a new sense of confidence. I had been invisible for so long, and now I was the center of attention. I saw people in the crowd who had ignored me all night, now trying to catch my eye, offering small apologetic smiles. I just smiled back, a knowing glint in my eyes. The conversation with Richard was easy, almost therapeutic. We talked about art, about history, about the things that truly mattered. He wasn't a snob. He was a genuinely curious man who saw people for who they were, not for what they had. I felt a sense of peace settle over me that had been absent all evening. I saw Daniel walking toward us with a look of desperate confusion on his face. He was clearly trying to figure out what was going on. He was about to ask Richard a question when Meredith, his future mother-in-law, intercepted him. She grabbed his arm, her whisper so furious it was almost a hiss. "What is going on, Daniel? Who is that man? And why is he talking to her?" Daniel just shook his head, looking completely lost. He's my boss, the CEO of Whitlock and Associates." Meredith's face paled. She looked at me, then at Richard, a look of pure, unadulterated horror on her face. Her worst nightmare was coming true. The woman she had dismissed as a common retired librarian was now the center of her son's boss's attention. The conversation with Richard continued, but my attention was now on Serena. She was watching us from a distance, her phone still in her hand, but she wasn't texting anymore. She was just staring, a panicked look in her eyes. She must have asked Daniel who Richard was, and she must have realized her mistake. She had just insulted me, a woman who had a genuine connection to one of the most powerful people in the room. Her carefully constructed world of appearances was starting to crumble, and I was going to be the one to kick it all down. I excused myself from the conversation with Richard, who gave me a knowing smile. I walked directly over to Serena. She flinched as I approached, a look of fear in her eyes. "Charlotte?" she said, her voice a little high, a little strained. You two know each other." I just smiled. "Yes, we do. He's a wonderful man, very discerning." The word discerning was a knife, and I saw her flinch. It was the word that professional observers used, the word that showed you had an eye for quality, And I knew, with a certainty that was absolute, that she did not. "I'm so glad you could make it," she said, trying to regain her composure. "Your dress. It's just so—" She trailed off, unable to find another word. I just smiled. "I know. It's not a designer dress. It's a simple, classic piece. You wouldn't find it in a major magazine." I was baiting her, and she was falling for it. "Exactly," she said, seizing on the opportunity. "It's a little quaint." She gave a little laugh, a nervous, high-pitched sound. "You know, Daniel and I were just talking about this. We're thinking of having our wedding featured in a magazine. Maybe Vogue." My blood ran cold, but my face remained perfectly calm. I was a professional, after all. "Really? That's quite an ambition," I said, my voice as smooth as silk. "Have you picked a photographer yet? A stylist?" She just waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, we've talked to a few people, but we're looking for someone with a real eye. Someone who can capture the moment. Someone with taste." The word hung in the air like a taunt. This was it. This was my moment. The moment I had been waiting for all night. I looked at her, and my smile grew a little wider. "I can help you with that," I said. "I know just the right person." She looked at me, a mixture of condescension and pity in her eyes. "Oh, Charlotte, that's sweet of you, but I don't think you know the kind of people we're looking for. We're talking about professional photographers, stylists, people who understand the industry." I just laughed, a low, throaty sound. "Serena, you don't understand the industry. You don't understand anything about it. You don't have a clue." She looked at me, her mouth slightly agape. She was completely taken aback. "What are you talking about?" She whispered. "I'm talking about the fact that your entire life is an illusion. Your dress, your attitude, your so-called taste. It's all a cheap imitation. You're a fake. And I know it because my job is to spot fakes. My job is to spot people with no taste." The crowd was starting to notice our hushed but intense conversation. They were looking at us, and I knew what they were thinking. What is the old lady saying to the bride? I took a deep breath. "Serena, I don't know who you think you are, but you have no idea who I am. I'm a secret shopper. Not for a department store. I'm a secret shopper for Vogue." The words hung in the air like a bomb. She recoiled, a look of pure, unadulterated horror on her face. That's not possible," she stammered. You're a retired librarian. I just left, and my alter ego is a professional critic. I'm the one who writes the anonymous reviews. I'm the one who determines what's in and what's out. I'm the one who picked out the very dress you're wearing, Serena." Her face paled. She looked like she was about to faint. She looked at her dress, then at me, her eyes wide with fear. That's a lie," she said, but her voice was weak. "Is it? The dress is from the summer collection, but the stitching on the hem is a full 2 inches off, a cheap imitation of a much more expensive brand. I wrote a whole article about it." The crowd was now completely silent, watching us. All eyes were on me. The woman they had ridiculed all night was now a queen. And the princess, the beautiful, stylish bride, was a fraud. This is the moment everything changed. Serena's humiliation was just the beginning. Everything you thought you knew about this story is about to be turned upside down. Serena's face, usually a picture of perfect poise, was a mask of utter disbelief and mounting panic. She looked at me, then down at the hem of her dress, her perfectly manicured fingers touching the fabric as if to verify my claim. The entire room seemed to hold its breath. Daniel, seeing the commotion, finally broke free from his mother and rushed over, his face a mix of concern and confusion. "Mom, what's going on? Serena, are you okay?" I didn't even look at him. My eyes were fixed on Serena, and my voice was a low, dangerous whisper. Tell him, Serena. Tell him what I just told you. Tell him about the dress you're wearing. Tell him about your taste. She looked at him, then at me, her eyes darting between us. She was trapped. She couldn't admit I was right without admitting she was a fake. But she couldn't deny it because I had just given her a piece of information that only a true insider would know. I saw her mind working, furiously trying to find a way out of the corner she had painted herself into. I decided to help her. Serena, you see, real taste isn't about wearing the right labels. It's about knowing the difference between quality and imitation. It's about being able to see through the illusion. And you, my dear, are all illusion. I then turned to Daniel. Your fiancé, I said, my voice calm and clear, just insulted me for my lack of taste. She was so confident in her superior knowledge that she didn't realize the dress she's wearing is a cheap knockoff. A gasp rippled through the crowd. This wasn't just a personal feud anymore. This was a public scandal. The perfect bride, the epitome of style and class, was a fraud. I saw Meredith Whitlock rush over to Serena, her face a mask of concern. "What are you talking about, Eleanor?" she demanded, her voice an angry hiss. "Serena's dress is from a designer boutique. It cost a fortune." I just smiled, a small, knowing smile. It might have cost a fortune, Meredith, but it's still a knockoff. The real designer has a signature stitch. It's a secret, a little detail that only the true connoisseurs know about. My job is to spot these details. My job is to see the truth. And the truth is, Serena is an imposter. Serena finally found her voice. It was shaky, but it was there. "That's not true. You're just trying to ruin my day," she wailed, tears welling up in her eyes. It was a perfect performance of a damsel in distress, but it wasn't going to work on me. "Am I?" I asked, my voice still dangerously calm. "I'm a professional, Serena. I don't lie, I observe. I've been observing you all night. And what I've observed is a woman who is so insecure that she has to tear others down to make herself feel bigger. I've observed a woman who is so obsessed with appearances that she's willing to buy a knockoff and pass it off as the real thing." Then I turned to the crowd, and my voice was no longer a whisper. It was a clarion call. I came here tonight to celebrate my son and his future wife. I came here with nothing but love and a desire to see them happy. And in return, I was publicly humiliated by a woman who is so empty inside that she has to pretend to be someone she's not. But you know what? It's not about the dress. It's not about the car. It's about a person's character. And Serena, you have none. I saw Daniel looking at Serena with a new, dawning horror in his eyes. He was seeing her for the first time, not as the perfect, beautiful woman he thought he knew, but as a cruel, insecure fraud. The spell was broken. I had done it. I had used my quiet, secret power to expose the truth. I had turned her greatest weapon, her perceived superiority, against her. And I had done it without raising my voice, without losing my dignity. I had won. I had not just defended myself, I had triumphed. I looked at Meredith Whitlock, whose face was a mixture of fury and defeat. I looked at Mr. Whitlock, who looked utterly mortified. And I looked at my son, whose face was a roadmap of confusion and betrayal. My work was done. I had shown them who I was, and I had shown them who Serena really was. My revenge was not loud, it was quiet and devastatingly effective. The room was in a state of chaos. People were whispering, staring, and pointing. I saw David Sterling giving me a small, approving nod from across the room. He knew. He had seen the entire exchange, and he had seen the truth. My life, which had been so quiet and predictable, was now an open book, but I didn't care. I had found my voice, and I had used it to speak the truth. And in a world of illusions, the truth is the most powerful weapon of all. I smiled, a genuine, happy smile. I had come to this party as a victim, and I was leaving it as a victor. But the story wasn't over yet, not by a long shot. Serena, in her humiliation, was not going to give up without a fight.
and I had a feeling that the worst was yet to come. I know you want to know what happens next, and I promise you, you won't want to miss it. This is the culmination of everything you've been waiting for. Everything I've just told you is about to be amplified tenfold. Stay tuned for the next chapter. It's going to be a wild ride.
The aftermath of my little reveal was exactly as chaotic as I had hoped, and just as satisfying. The beautiful, sparkling ballroom had become a war zone, and the casualties were the Whitlock's dignity. Serena was a tearful, sobbing mess, her face blotchy and red, a stark contrast to her once perfect makeup. She was trying to hide behind Daniel, who looked completely shell-shocked. He was patting her back awkwardly, his eyes flicking between her and me, a million questions in them. He was seeing her and me for the first time, not as a perfect fiancée and a doting mother, but as two women in a very ugly fight. I felt a pang of pity for him. He was just a pawn in this ridiculous game of social one-upmanship, but my pity was quickly replaced by a sense of quiet triumph. I had won. For now. I gave a polite nod to David Sterling, who was watching the scene unfold with a small, appreciative smile. He discreetly raised his glass to me, and I returned the gesture, a silent acknowledgement of our shared victory. My work here was done, or so I thought. I was about to make my quiet, dignified exit when Meredith Whitlock, a woman whose face was now a mask of pure, unadulterated fury, stormed over to me. Her perfectly coiffed blonde bob seemed to quiver with rage. "You!" she hissed, pointing a perfectly manicured finger at me. "You did this! You are a terrible, evil woman!" Her voice was a low, dangerous whisper, but it was filled with venom. "You came here to ruin my son's engagement party. You came here to destroy my family's reputation." I just smiled, a small, weary smile. "Meredith, your family's reputation was destroyed the moment you decided to judge me for my dress. I simply held up a mirror and showed you what you look like." Her face went crimson. She was a woman who was not used to being challenged, and she was clearly at a loss. "You're a liar," she spat out. "You're not a secret shopper for Vogue. You're just a nobody, a retired librarian who is trying to get some attention." I just raised an eyebrow. "Is that so? Then why are you so upset? If I'm a nobody, then my words shouldn't bother you. But they do, don't they? Because you know I'm telling the truth." I felt a sudden fierce pride. This was a battle of wit, and I was winning. "I'm not a liar, Meredith. I'm an observer. And I've been observing you all night. I've observed a woman who is so obsessed with appearances that she is willing to buy a fake dress for her daughter-in-law to wear at her own engagement party. And I've observed a family that is so desperate for status that they are willing to humiliate a retired librarian just to feel superior. I didn't ruin your reputation, Meredith. You did." Serena, who had been listening from a distance, suddenly broke free from Daniel's grasp and ran to the microphone. Her face was a tear-streaked mess, but her eyes were filled with a vicious, cold anger. "She's lying!" she shrieked, her voice echoing through the silent ballroom. "She's trying to break us up. She's been nothing but trouble from the start. She's a lonely, bitter old woman who wants to ruin our happiness." The accusations were so wild, so theatrical, that I almost laughed. It was a pathetic last-ditch effort to save face. "She has no life, no friends. She spends all her time alone in her little house, and now she's trying to get revenge on us for being happy." It was a desperate plea for sympathy, but it was too late. I had already shown them the truth. The crowd was silent, but their eyes were on Serena, and they were filled with a cold, cynical look. They had seen her for what she was, a spoiled, insecure child.
I saw David Sterling stand up from his seat and walk over to me. He put a hand on my shoulder, a gesture of quiet support. "I believe I can vouch for Eleanor's character," he said, his voice calm and authoritative. The crowd turned to him, their faces a mixture of surprise and respect. "Eleanor is not a bitter old woman. She's a kind and generous person. In fact, this morning she went out of her way to help a complete stranger, a stranger who happens to be a very powerful person in this city. She did it out of the goodness of her heart, not for money or recognition. And as for a secret shopper for Vogue, I can confirm that she is not a liar. I can't reveal her identity, of course, but I can tell you that she is a very respected and valuable member of our team." The gasps were audible. Serena's face went white. She looked like she had been slapped. The last thread of her credibility had just been cut. She dropped the microphone and ran off the stage, a sobbing mess. Daniel stood there for a moment, looking after her. Then he looked at me, a look of profound disappointment and regret on his face. He didn't say anything. He just turned and walked away. My son was gone. I felt a sudden, sharp pang of loneliness. I had won the battle, but I had lost the war. My relationship with my son was now broken, perhaps irreversibly. The party was over. The guests were leaving, whispering and staring. I saw Meredith Whitlock whispering furiously into her husband's ear, a look of vengeful fury on her face. I knew this wasn't the end. This was just the beginning. I had exposed their lies, and now they would come after me. I had a feeling they would not stop until they had destroyed me. My phone buzzed with a message from my friend Carol. "Eleanor, what did you do? The whole city is talking about it. You're a legend." I smiled a sad smile. A legend. A lonely legend. I walked out of the ballroom, my head held high, but my heart was heavy. I was a victor, but I was also a casualty, and I had a feeling the worst was coming. I was a professional, but I was also a mother, and my heart was breaking. When I got home, the house was dark and quiet. I walked into the living room and sat down on my favorite chair. I was exhausted. I was about to go to bed when I noticed a strange email on my computer. The subject line was, "Urgent, legal notice." I opened it, my heart pounding in my chest. It was from the Whitlocks lawyers. It was a cease and desist letter, telling me to stop slandering their family and that if I didn't, they would sue me for $1 million. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the last paragraph. It was a threat. A threat to my home, to my job, and to my life. They were going to use their power and influence to destroy me. I had won the first battle, but they were going to win the war.
The email from the Whitlocks lawyers was a cold, calculated strike, a declaration of war. It wasn't just a legal threat, it was a promise that they would use every resource at their disposal to dismantle my life piece by piece. They were going to make me pay for the humiliation I had inflicted on them. My hands trembled as I read the words again. Slander, defamation, $1 million. They were not playing games. They were going for the jugular. And the threat to my home and my job? That was the true punchline. They were going to try and take everything from me just because I had dared to speak the truth. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. I had been so confident, so sure that my quiet victory was enough. But I had underestimated their arrogance, their need for control, their utter lack of a moral compass. They were not just socialites. They were predators. And they were going to hunt me down. The phone rang and I jumped. I looked at the caller ID. It was my son, Daniel. I hesitated for a moment, then I answered. "Mom," he said, his voice a strained whisper. "What happened tonight? Is it true?" He sounded like a lost little boy, and my heart ached for him. "Is what true, Daniel?" I asked, my voice soft. "About Serena, about her dress, about Vogue." He sounded so confused, so hurt. "It's all true, honey," I said. "Every word. I'm so sorry." He was silent for a moment. She's not who I thought she was," he said, his voice cracking. "She was so angry when we got home. She said you were a liar, that you were just jealous. But then her father came in, and he looked at her dress. And he said the same thing you did. He said it was a knockoff." He sounded defeated, and I wanted to reach through the phone and hug him. "She lied to me, Mom," he said, his voice filled with betrayal. "She lied to all of us." I didn't know what to say. He was finally seeing the truth, but it was a painful truth, and I knew it was going to destroy him. "I'm so sorry, Daniel," I said again, a lump forming in my throat. "I'm so sorry." He just hung up, and I was left alone in the quiet darkness with nothing but the email from the lawyers and the knowledge that my son's heart was breaking. I knew I had to do something. I couldn't just sit here and let them destroy me. I wasn't going to be a victim. I was going to fight back. But how? I was a retired librarian. I had no money, no power. I had nothing but my reputation, and they were going to try and take that away from me. I thought about the little golden retriever I had helped. He was vulnerable and alone, but he had people who were willing to fight for him. I had to find my people. I had to find my army. I picked up my phone and called my friend Carol. "Carol," I said, my voice filled with a new determination, "I need your help. The Whitlocks are coming after me." She didn't hesitate for a moment. "I'm on my way," she said, and I knew I wasn't alone anymore. My quiet, boring life was over. I was in a war, and I was going to fight it with everything I had. The next morning, I woke up with a plan. I wasn't just going to fight back. I was going to expose them. I was going to use my secret life, my connections, my knowledge to bring them down. I was a secret shopper, and I was going to expose the biggest fake of all, the Whitlock family. My phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. It was a video. I opened it, my heart pounding in my chest. It was a video of Serena and Meredith taken at the engagement party. They were in the corner, and they were talking about me. "She's so pathetic. She thinks she's so special, but she's nothing. Just a sad old woman who lives in a dump." Meredith was laughing. "Don't worry, sweetie. We'll take care of her. We'll make sure she never bothers you again." I felt a cold fury rise up in me. They were not just bullies. They were cruel, heartless monsters. They had no idea who they were dealing with. I was a retired librarian, a secret shopper for Vogue, and a mother whose heart had been broken by her own son. And I was going to make them pay. I am telling you right now, you won't want to miss the next chapter. The story is just beginning. The Whitlocks have just made the biggest mistake of their lives, and they have no idea what's coming for them. The next chapter is where the tables are finally turned and the real revenge begins. It's going to be a spectacular show. The cold, calculated words of the legal notice lay on my kitchen counter, a physical representation of the war that had just been declared. The video on my phone, with Serena and Meredith's cruel laughter, was the fuel to my fire. They thought they could scare me. They thought they could bully me into submission. They had no idea who they were dealing with. I was no longer a retired librarian. I was a professional observer, a hunter of fakes, and I had just been given the biggest assignment of my life.
My quiet, unassuming life was over, and I was going to use every single tool in my arsenal to bring them down. This wasn't just about a dress anymore. It was about justice. It was about standing up for all the kind, quiet people who get overlooked and taken for granted. And I was going to win. My first call was to my editor at Vogue. I had a good relationship with her, built on years of trust and impeccable work. I didn't tell her everything, but I told her I had a story, a big one. A story that was not just about fashion, but about the dark underbelly of a powerful family. I told her I had proof of fraud, of casual cruelty, and of a family that was so obsessed with status that they would destroy anyone who got in their way. She was intrigued. My second call was to David Sterling. He was a busy man, but he was also a man who appreciated integrity. I didn't ask him for help. I just told him I had discovered something about the Whitlock family that he, as a partner in their firm, needed to know. I told him I had evidence that their public image was a carefully constructed lie. He was silent for a moment. Then he gave me his personal email. "Send me what you have, Charlotte, and be ready to talk." I was ready. I spent the next 2 days compiling my dossier. I didn't just focus on the dress. My years as a secret shopper had trained me to see the world in layers, to spot the inconsistencies, to see the cracks in the facade. I went through the Whitlock's social media, their public appearances, their philanthropic ventures. I found things. Small things at first. A charity event that was all for show. A donation that was a fraction of what they claimed. A partnership with a company that was known for its shoddy workmanship. It was a web of lies, a beautifully woven tapestry of deceit. The dress was just the tip of the iceberg. I put everything into a detailed report, complete with screenshots and dates. I sent it to my editor at Vogue, and I sent a separate, more detailed version to David Sterling. I also sent the video of Serena and Meredith to a trusted journalist I knew. I didn't just want to expose them. I wanted to destroy their reputation in a way that would be impossible to fix. I wanted to show the world that their money and their status were built on a foundation of lies and cruelty. The first article came out on Tuesday morning. It wasn't in Vogue, but in a local newspaper. The headline was a masterpiece of clickbait. "The $1 million fake. The Whitlock family's socialite daughter-in-law caught in a web of lies." The article detailed the engagement party, the dress, and my quiet, devastating reveal. It was a sensation. The video of Serena and Meredith's cruel laughter was already going viral. My name was everywhere, but not as a victim. I was a hero. The unlikely hero. The librarian who took down a socialite. The woman who refused to be bullied. My phone was ringing off the hook with interview requests. I declined them all. This wasn't about me. It was about them. The Whitlocks were completely blindsided. They had been so confident in their power, so sure that they could just crush me with a legal notice, that they didn't see the public storm coming. Their carefully constructed image was crumbling before their eyes. Mr. Whitlock, in a desperate attempt to save face, gave a press conference. He called the articles slanderous and malicious and promised to sue everyone involved. But it was too late. The public had already made up its mind. They saw a powerful family using their money and influence to bully a retired woman, and they were not having it. Their attempts to paint me as a liar just made them look more pathetic. I was watching it all from the quiet comfort of my living room. The TV was on and the news anchors were talking about me. I was a celebrity, but a quiet one. My phone buzzed. It was an email from David Sterling. The subject line was simple. "I've seen enough." I smiled. He had seen my report. He had seen the truth. My plan was working perfectly. I had not just fought back, but I had turned their greatest weapon, their public image, against them. The war was far from over, but the first battle had been won. But I knew the real fight was yet to come. They were not going to go down without a fight, and they were going to come after me. The media firestorm was a thing of beautiful, chaotic poetry. It was a masterpiece of my own making, a perfect storm that was ripping the Whitlocks' carefully constructed world apart. The initial articles were just the beginning. The story of the librarian versus the socialite was picked up by national news outlets, and it became a full-blown national sensation. The comment sections were a sea of support for me and a wave of scorn for the Whitlocks. The public had found their hero, and I was it. But I wasn't just a hero. I was a strategist. I knew that their first response would be to sue, and I was ready for it. My lawyer, a kind old man who had helped me with my late husband's will, was a bit out of his depth. So I called another old friend, a former student of mine who had gone on to become a very successful corporate lawyer. "I need your help," I said. "I'm in a war with a family who has more money than God, and I need a warrior." He didn't hesitate. "I'm in, Charlotte, and I'm doing it pro bono." I smiled. I wasn't just a warrior. I was building an army. The Whitlocks, meanwhile, were spiraling. Their desperate attempts to control the narrative were failing spectacularly. Mr. Whitlock, in a fit of rage, gave an interview where he called me a crazy old witch and accused me of being obsessed with his family. His words, meant to harm me, just made him look more unhinged. Meredith's attempts to appear calm and collected on social media were met with a barrage of angry comments. They were trapped in a public relations nightmare, a hell of their own making. I was a ghost, a quiet force they couldn't touch. I gave no interviews, no comments. I just let the truth speak for itself. But the best was yet to come. My editor at Vogue called me. "Charlotte, David Sterling just called me. He's seen your report and he's impressed. He wants to know if you'd be willing to write a feature article for us, a deep dive into the world of social fakes and the people who profit from them, and he wants you to write it under your own name." It was a complete game changer. I wasn't just a secret shopper anymore. I was a published author. My work, which had always been quiet and anonymous, was now going to be out in the open. It was the ultimate vindication, the final, perfect victory. I agreed, of course. I had a story to tell, and I was going to tell it with every ounce of my being. I was going to expose the Whitlocks for what they were: empty, insecure, and ultimately pathetic. The legal threats continued, but my new lawyer just laughed them off. "They have no case, Charlotte. You haven't slandered them. You've just told the truth. And truth is an absolute defense." The Whitlocks were a force of nature, a hurricane of arrogance and money. But I was a quiet, unmovable rock, and their storm was just going to crash against me. I was a woman of substance, and they were a family of illusions. The final confrontation was coming. It was going to be a showdown, a battle for the soul of my family, for the dignity of a quiet woman, and for the very idea of what is real and what is fake in this world. And I was going to be ready. The phone rang. It was Daniel. "Mom," he said, his voice hesitant. I'm so sorry." He was a broken man. She was a monster. I had no idea. He was finally seeing her for what she was, and it was devastating him. "I'm so sorry, Mom," he said again, tears in his voice. "I love you. I'm coming home." I hung up the phone, a single tear running down my cheek. I had lost him for a moment, but I had him back. I had my son back. That was the real victory, the only one that truly mattered. I was ready for the final battle. I had my son, my friends, my reputation. I had everything. And the Whitlocks, they had nothing. And I was going to show the world. My son Daniel's call was the final piece of a puzzle I hadn't even known I was solving. It was the emotional anchor that I had been desperately searching for.
My heart, which had been a cold, hardened stone, finally began to thaw. I told him to come home, and I hung up the phone. I knew the Whitlocks would not let him go without a fight. They had lost control of the narrative. Their public image was in tatters, and their money was failing them. Their final weapon was my son, and they were going to use him against me. I was ready. I wasn't just a mother anymore. I was a warrior, and I was going to fight for my son's soul. I called Carol, my loyal friend, and told her what was happening. She was a woman of action, and she didn't hesitate for a second. "I'm on my way," she said, "and I'm bringing a camera. We're going to document this." My new lawyer, the former student, also got a call. I told him what was about to happen, and he gave me a few simple instructions. "Stay calm, Charlotte. Don't say anything you don't have to. And whatever you do, do not let them in the house." I felt a new sense of power. I was no longer fighting alone. My small army was ready. I waited in the living room, the legal notice still on the counter, the video on my phone, my evidence ready to be presented. My house, which had always been a sanctuary, was now a fortress. The doorbell rang an hour later. It was my son. He was standing on the porch, a suitcase in his hand. His shoulders slumped. He looked defeated. I opened the door, and I just stood there for a moment, looking at him. My beautiful, kind son, who had been so lost. He just looked at me, his eyes filled with a deep, profound sadness. "Mom," he whispered, and he just fell into my arms. I held him, and I didn't say a word. I just let him cry. He was home, but I knew this wasn't the end. I saw a black car pull up to the curb. It was the Whitlocks. Meredith, Mr. Whitlock, and Serena. They were all there, looking furious and desperate. They had followed my son here. They were not going to let him go. They got out of the car and stormed up to the porch. "Daniel!" Serena shrieked. "Get back in the car!" Daniel just looked at her, his face filled with a cold, new anger. "You lied to me, Serena," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "You lied to all of us, and I'm not going back with you." Serena's face contorted with rage. She looked at me. "You did this," she screamed. "You poisoned him against me. You're a lonely, bitter old woman who wants to ruin everyone's happiness." I just stood there, my arm around my son, and I smiled. "Serena," I said, my voice as calm as a summer breeze, "I'm not a lonely, bitter old woman. I'm a professional, and my job is to spot fakes. And you, my dear, are the biggest fake of all." Mr. Whitlock stepped forward, his face red with fury. "This is slander, Eleanor. We're going to sue you for everything you have. We're going to take your house and your job, and we're going to leave you with nothing." I just shook my head. "You're too late, Mr. Whitlock," I said. "You see, I've already exposed you. The public knows what kind of people you are. And I have a feeling that your clients, your investors, and the city council are going to be very interested in what I've discovered." His face went pale. He knew. He knew I had the goods on him. And then I pulled out my phone and held it up. I had a video of my own. I had gone to one of their construction sites, a luxury apartment complex they had built, and I had recorded the shoddy workmanship, the cheap materials, the blatant disregard for safety regulations. I had the video, and I had the proof. I'm not just a secret shopper for Vogue. I'm also a concerned citizen, and I have proof that your company is a fraud. You're not just selling knockoff dresses. You're building knockoff buildings. And I have a feeling that your clients, your investors, and the city council are going to be very interested in what I found." His face was a mask of utter horror. He knew. He knew I had the goods on him. Serena, in a last-ditch effort, ran toward Daniel. "Daniel, please, don't do this. I love you," she screamed. Daniel just looked at her, his face filled with a quiet new resolve. "I'm sorry, Serena, but you're not the woman I thought you were. You're a liar, and I'm not going to be a part of your lies anymore." He then turned to me. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I should have listened to you." I just held him tighter. I had my son back. And that was all that mattered. The Whitlocks stood there for a moment, defeated. They had lost. They had lost everything. They had lost their son, their reputation, and their business. And they had lost to a retired librarian in a simple gray dress. I am a victor, but I am also a survivor. I survived the betrayal of my daughter-in-law, the humiliation of my son, and the threat of the Whitlocks, and I came on top. I am a professional, but I am also a mother, and my love for my son was the most powerful weapon of all. The story is over, but my life is just beginning. I have a new purpose, a new reputation, and a new life. And I have my son back. That is the greatest victory of all.
The confrontation on my front porch ended as swiftly as it began. With their pride and their lies shattered, the Whitlocks had nowhere to go but back to their black car, which now seemed less like a symbol of power and more like a hearse. Mr. Whitlock's face was ashen. Meredith's fury had been replaced by a blank, disbelieving stare. Serena's sobs were no longer theatrical. They were the raw, gut-wrenching cries of a woman who had just lost her entire world. I just watched them go, a quiet sense of satisfaction settling in my bones. I had not just won, I had decimated them. The illusion they had so meticulously crafted was gone forever. After they left, Daniel and I stood there for a long moment, just holding each other. The silence was not awkward. It was a peaceful, healing silence. He finally pulled away and looked at me, his eyes red-rimmed but clear. "Mom," he said, "I'm so sorry. I don't know how I could have been so blind." I just shook my head. "It's not your fault, honey. People like that are very good at what they do. They're very good at creating a world that you want to believe in. But that world was a lie, and I'm so proud of you for seeing the truth." He just nodded, and a small, weary smile touched his lips. He was home. He was finally, truly home. My quiet, unassuming house, which had been a battleground just minutes before, was now a sanctuary again. We went inside, and I made us some tea. We sat at the kitchen table, and we talked for hours. He told me about all the little things he had noticed, the little lies, the little inconsistencies that had been bugging him, the little red flags that he had just ignored. And I listened, my heart swelling with pride. He was my son again, my kind, honest son. The next few days were a blur. The legal threats from the Whitlocks stopped. My lawyer, in a phone call that morning, said he had sent them the information I had on their company. "They dropped the case, Charlotte," he said, "and they're not going to bother you again. They have much bigger problems now. I have a feeling the city council is going to be very interested in their construction projects." My article in Vogue came out the following week. It wasn't a hit piece. It was a thoughtful, powerful essay about the difference between style and substance, between a beautiful life and a life of illusions. I wrote about my own journey, about how a quiet, retired librarian found her voice and used it to speak the truth. I didn't use their names, but everyone knew who I was talking about. It was the final, devastating blow. The socialites who had laughed at my dress were now the punchline of a national joke, and the woman who had no taste was now the most respected voice in fashion. I am a victor, but I am also a survivor. I survived the betrayal of my daughter-in-law, the humiliation of my son, and the threat of the Whitlocks, and I came out on top. I am a professional, but I am also a mother, and my love for my son was the most powerful weapon of all. The story is over, but my life is just beginning. I have a new purpose, a new reputation, and a new life. And I have my son back. That is the greatest victory of all. The Whitlocks are a footnote in my story, a cautionary tale about the dangers of living a lie. And I am the hero. My life is quiet again, but it's a new kind of quiet. It's a quiet filled with confidence, with purpose, and with a deep, abiding sense of peace. My son is home, and my heart is full. I'm no longer just a retired librarian. I'm a writer, a hero, a mother, and I wouldn't have it any other way.